this area of sea. There is a strong breeze. It's still that's only 1 mile. That's one. Hi there guys, Tom here from Wahoo. I thought I'd just do a chat for anyone that's interested about how I go about preparing for day's fishing and where I'm planning on going and why. The two most important things when you're planning a fishing trip, in my opinion, is wind and tide. So between the wind and the tide, it doesn't really matter to me too much about sun or rain or even fog and mist, because I've got radar on the boat, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm worried about wind and tide because they're the two largest factors when you're fishing. So let's go through wind first. So I use the Windy app on my phone. So this is a really good app. I just have it set to wind and then I zoom in on my location, and blue is good, green not so good, yellow definitely not good. So you can see it's 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I'm actually back in now, so yeah, nice and calm out there today. You can play it forwards, play and stop. You can run it forwards, see what's going on tomorrow. You can see the wind's picking up from the south. There's actually a bit of a lull there, but I wouldn't believe it. So let's just assume it is like this. So if you type here 13 knots from the south, yeah, that's a force 4 from the south. So this is the area in which I fish. I guess where the screen is now, you can see you've got Guernsey, Alderney, Sark here. So I've actually got a chart of Sark to show you. I've got a little boat that not really a master craftsman, but I've got a little boat here to show you. So we're very lucky in these islands because there's always somewhere sheltered to fish. So you can see if the wind's from the south, you get shelter up here in the north. Same up here. There's always a sheltered area of a sheltered part of coastline. Southerly breeze here isn't ideal, but I'm just going to use an example basically of Sark over here. That's Sark. I'm just going to use an example of this southerly breeze where I'd most likely fish in Sark. So if I transfer to the chart, so that's wind rate. So you can run windy. You can run it forwards. You can see Sunday. Yeah, Sunday's even. I'm not going to be going fishing over the weekend, but if I wanted to, I wouldn't recommend going out in a small boat, the size of mine or smaller. I wouldn't recommend going out in anything over a force 4, and slow to get out to your fishing spots. And yeah, I just wouldn't worry about it. Just wait until you got a force 2, 3, maybe kind of gusting 4. But if you've got a steady 4 or 5 like that, it's going to just to waves. It's another good one. So you can see the waves here. 1/2 meter swell period of 4 seconds. If I zoom out, that's not too bad really. So if the wind's pushing up from here, I don't want to be down here, yeah, or here, because there's a lot of fetch. You could fetch is uninterrupted distance over the sea. So I want to put some land in the way to give me some shelter. Going to reduce the waves. So the waves are pushing up from here, and the land breaks up the waves. So I want to fish either up here in this bay here, up here, or maybe over here. Give it a go over here. It's a little bit exposed. You've still got this area of sea. There is a strong breeze. It's still that's only 1 mile. That's 1 mile, but it's still enough to create a bit of a chop if the wind's strong enough. And if the wind's from here, there's no shelter at all. If the wind's from here, you've got a bit of shelter. So if I come across here, that's Sark on the app there. This is Sark on the paper chart. So I would, in a southerly breeze, I would look to fish up on the northern end somewhere, up around here. You've got a sandbank here. So I'd take my boat down the, you arrive at the fishing spot in your boat, and because there's a southerly breeze, your boat is going to go side on to the breeze and it's going to drift. It's going to be heading north like this. Yeah, similarly if the wind's, so the wind's from the south, it's always measured from where it's coming from. So your boat's going to sit side on to the breeze and it's going to drift north. So you want to come down here, this is our feature here, and the wind is going to push you up over this way, and your lines are going to be coming out the side of the boat here. That's of course without any tide, but of course you now need to put tide into the equation. There's this good app for Guernsey tides, Digimap it's called, and it'll tell me, so if I click on tomorrow, it'll tell me high water is at 11:30. Right, so I want to go, if I want to go fishing over the high water, that's going to be 3 hours before to 3 hours after. So that's going to be 8:30 in the morning till around 2:30 in the afternoon. If I want to fish over the high water, I head out at 8:30 in the morning, and then I'll fish there. So what I want to know is, what is the tidal current going to be doing? You compare, if I go through the charts here, some of the charts even have a tidal diagram, and you have these tidal curves. I won't go through them today, but these tidal images of what the surface currents are doing. So what you've also got, what I would recommend getting, is, you know, you can go out and you can make your own observations, but someone's already done it for you. So you want one of these. It's a tidal stream atlas. They're made for all waters around the UK, and if you're from a different country, then you should have your own kind of hydrographic office should produce something like this. You can probably most get them on the internet these days, so I like to use these. So you get your tidal streams. So what I want to know is the tides times. So I've worked out what the wind and waves are doing. Now I go to what I want to know also is the height of the tide. So this height for us, we have pretty, this is in meters, we have pretty big tides over here. So you can see that's nearly 8 meter tide, so that's halfway between springs. Spring tide is a large tidal range and a neap tide is a small tidal range. So we're actually coming from springs down to neaps, so the tides are getting the tidal range and height, and therefore the current strength is getting smaller each day. Currently at the moment, this is all to do with the phases of the moon, and I'm not going to get into that. All I want to know is high water, the height, so if it's a spring or a neap, so it's more going to neaps now, so there's going to be slightly less surface current for the tides, and then I go across onto my tidal atlas here. So if I'm not sure what the tides are doing, I want to, this goes by St Helier, it's in Jersey. The high water in Guernsey is close to this time, so I want to go to 3 hours before high water. Say I'm going to turn up 2 hours before high water. Okay, at my fishing spot, I'm going to arrive 2 hours before high water. This is 1 hour 40 before high water in Jersey. So I look at the tidal streams. So you can see the tides heading, the water's heading from here. It's coming along here and heading up around this headland here. So it's heading to the northeast. These numbers here are speed in knots. So So that looks like 11 and 27. It's actually 1.1 knot on a neap tide and 2.7 knots on a spring tide. You can see here 1.8 knots on a neap tide and 4.4 knots on a spring tide. So that's a significant amount of flow, surface flow of water. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is I'm going to have between 0.7 and 1.8. So I'm going to call it a knot. I'm going to have a knot and a bit of tide heading to the north. Okay, when I arrive at my fishing spot, then what's going to happen at high water, it's 1 hour before high water, and then this is at high water. You can see the current kind of stays the same. It gets stronger around here, but where I want to fish here, it kind of stays the same. It's around a knot and a bit, and 1.2 knots of tide I'm going to have here. But what you can see significantly is that the tide is going the same direction as the wind. So what does that mean? Well, that means that, where's my boat? Here's my boat. That means that when I arrive at my fishing spot and I stop my boat, the wind and the tide are both coming from this direction, so that's going to increase. So I'm already drifting at 1.2 knots in the tide, plus I got the wind, so that's going to give me another at least half a knot, I'd say, of surface current. So I'm going to be drifting at least 2 knots. So it's not a particularly big tide, but I'm going to be drifting at 2 knots up here. So it's manageable. It's going to be a bit choppy up here because the wind's from the south, half a metre. However, the main thing to mention is when you got wind with tide, it's not going to increase the waves. When you got wind with tide, it's usually calmer. When you got wind with tide, okay, you're going to be drifting faster, which is gonna send you over the fish quicker. So your fish are hanging out here, and you're going to be drifting over them quicker. It's worth mentioning that over here in the Channel Islands, a lot of our fishing is done drifting. I know in the south, well, all around the UK, you guys like to anchor. So if you drop your anchor here, if you drop your anchor, say here, your boat's going to swing, and you've got wind with tide. So your boat's going to be sat here, and your lines are going to be coming out the back. But again, you're going to have more flow. You're going to have more flow out the back, so you're going to need to use heavier weights. Wind with tide is generally a good thing, as long as it's a light breeze. This from the forecast, looking like a force 4 is going to be too much. You're going to be drifting too fast. It's still going to be choppy. What we want ideally is we want a little bit of either wind across tide, or we want no wind at all, or we want a light breeze holding us back on the drift. So if I'm fishing here and I'm like the tidal streams, obviously the tide times change, but I know now that at high water, whatever time of day it is, at high water, you've got the surface water all moving this way. And now I can make a mental note of that. Yeah, what we'd like is when the tide's running north over high water, it'd be nice to just have a little bit of wind coming from the north just to hold us back on our drift. It'll slow the boat down. It'll still hold it sideways because you've got tide here and you've got wind here, right? So you're still going to be drifting this way, but a lot slower. So you're going to spend more time in this area where you expect the fish to be. You're going to spend longer in this area, which is going to give you more chance per drift. So once your boat ends up here, you want to motor back down, start here again, or start here again, and you're drifting over your spot. Your lines are coming out this way, remember, that way. So you come along and you're drifting up this way. If you've got a light breeze coming from here, it's going to hold you back in your drift. The only problem with that is that wind against tide. So hopefully you've heard about, yeah, if you're using a boat for fishing, you've heard about wind against tide. It can get pretty nasty. So you've got the surface water all moving this way, and then you've got the wind trying to hold it back, and so of course that's going to push up the surface of the water and create more wavy choppy conditions. So yeah, always be careful with wind against tide. If you've got a small tidal current and you've got a light breeze, then it's fine. It'll actually help your fishing because you'll spend more time in the fish zone. However, if it's a strong breeze with a strong tide and the breeze is going this way and the tide's going that way, then it's going to get it's going to get nasty, especially in this shallow water. You can see you've got 9 meters there on a low tide, on a very low tide. As the water pushes up over here, you're going to get overfalls. You can actually see on the chart these little wavelets here, big waves. Okay, these are overfalls. So as the water mass moves this way, it's forced up over this shallow ridge, and that's going to create a lot of turbulence on the surface of the water. Here's an example of some overfalls on a calm day. You can see them there. So it's good to bear that in mind as well. And it's the most important, to reiterate, they're the two most important things when you're fishing. You want to know what time the high or low tide is, how big the tides are for the tidal currents, and then what the wind is doing. You want to know what the tides are doing at a certain, for your tidal currents, and you want to know what the tide's doing, what the wind's doing, because if you've got wind against tide, it's a bad idea. If you've got strong wind with tide, you're going to be drifting too fast, or if you're anchored, your lines are going to be going too far off the back of the boat. You have to use very heavy weights. So yeah, it's worth looking ahead. I wouldn't look ahead more than four or 5 days before a fishing trip, 3 or 4 days even, because the weather forecasts still, even to this day, aren't that accurate. So yeah, fishing is that you have to gain all of this knowledge on every spot you want to fish through the year, through the seasons, through the tide, and through the weather conditions, with different methods and different baits. So there's millions of bits of information to learn, and it really takes a lifetime to learn it. So it's a very challenging thing to do, which is why I like it.